Now they are.
Now they are.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Truly seeing the identity of Christ. We're going to read today, before we start, from 1 Corinthians 1, verses 18 through 24 in the New Revised Standard. For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to those of us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, God decided, through the foolishness of our proclamation, to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs, and Greeks desire wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. What is this message about the cross? Some translations of the Bible, such as the New Revised Standard and the Common English Bible, use the phrase, message of the cross. Other versions, such as the New American Standard, use word of the cross. The King James Version says, preaching of the cross. All the versions emphasize the cross. It is as if the wood of the cross itself is preaching. The author of 1 Corinthians is relating that the message is foolishness, which another word for that is just kind of mentally weak, just foolishness. Foolishness to those who are perishing or dying. Images of the old, I like the old 1953 black and white movie Titanic. Some of you guys here at Dearson probably prefer the 1997 Leonardo DiCaprio, but there's a lot of different versions out there. But I just think it's a powerful movie. And I'm sure you remember the final scenes, the nearer my God to thee, which may or may not have really been playing, but in the movie, at least the one I like, it was playing. And they're perishing. People out in the lifeboats, they are perishing. And what you see, those beautiful furnishings from the first class dining room are foolishness. They don't mean a thing. They're all going into the cold Atlantic, and those who are lucky enough to get in that wood of the lifeboat are there in the water. First class, gone. Whoever is in that lifeboat are the ones who are surviving, not perishing. So have that kind of thought as we plow into this. The language on this is a little tricky sometimes, because Paul, who is the author, is doing a lot of different comparisons. So you really kind of have to think about some of these comparisons that he's talking about. The Corinthians that he was writing to were learning that this message of the cross was really of no use to them if they were dying, but if they were in the process of being saved, the message of the cross is the power of God. The message of the cross to those in the process of being saved is like that wood of the lifeboat. And it links the power of God to whoever believes in Christ. It's like verse 24 that we just read here a moment ago, and might be in your Bibles that you have open there. Verse 24, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. That's defining who Christ is. When we look at this portion a little bit closer, again, Paul was the author. Paul, you remember about Paul, he was called a little bit later to be the apostle that was called by Christ to preach to the Gentiles. Now, you remember who the Gentiles are. Jesus, most of his disciples were Jews. The Gentiles were the people who weren't Jews. So Paul was primarily called to those people. The purpose of his writing was to send grace and to address the report of quarreling among the people. Now, so that's another issue that's going on. You've got quarreling. Some people were claiming allegiance to Paul, others to Apollos, who was another Jewish Christian, others to Cephas, who was Peter, and others to Christ. It would be as if I were to proclaim that since I attend this church and I was baptized by this person, that I'm just better. I'm in much better shape than this person over here who adheres more to this minister or this train of thought. So quarreling, I know that might be hard to believe, but quarreling about those kinds of things. That's one of the reasons Paul was writing. Corinth was a multi-religious environment, and it was filled with a lot of pagan temples. It was a natural trading center in the Roman Empire between the East and the West. The citizens were mostly former slaves and new immigrants. Each group had their own customs, so the tensions were caused to some extent by the breaking down of some of those barriers. Things happen sometimes when barriers are broken down. People may be unsure of where they fit. I know you guys are from lots of different places. A lot of you are from Kentucky, some of you are not, some of you are from the city, from the country. And as you all know, sometimes we don't all get along. We want to, but sometimes we don't. And sometimes those quarrelings happen because we're not sure where we fit. As you all know, people come in here, they come in, others leave, we have our graduations, so there's a lot of mixing of people. And when you come in on day one, you have to figure out where you fit. And sometimes tensions arise. And you can see why some of that quarreling, well, I belong to this group. No, I belong to that group. And my group is better. You can see how that was a problem. Let's compare. Again, going back to this idea of wisdom. Now, when you think of wisdom, you think smart. Some of you guys may have made real good grades in school. Some of you they didn't, for whatever. That's okay, because we're not talking about who got an A in math in the 8th grade. We're not talking about that. Because as you all know, wisdom is a lot more than who got the best grade in math in the 8th grade. So we're talking about wisdom. Paul identified wisdom as the root of the problems in that Corinthian assembly and a threat to the power of the cross of Christ. He was contrasting Christ crucified over here, with the wisdom of the world. You think, well, wisdom of the cross, wisdom of the world, what's the difference? Paul utilized some plays on these words: foolishness, power, weakness. Foolishness, power, weakness. He was contrasting them. At first, he set it up in opposition, if you will, to what's over here, the wisdom of the world, to what's over here, the wisdom of the cross. But then the thing that linked them, that kind of moved in his explanation, was this idea of wisdom. It moved from the wisdom of the world to that wisdom of the cross, that piece of wood. And again, think of those people being saved out here. Think of those perishing people being saved through that wood. And we're going to link it up here in just a few minutes. Verse 19 tells us that even if we are wise, even if we have the gift of discernment, what is discernment? judging well. I might say, you want this pencil or this pen. And if you're going to discern, you're going to figure out which is this going to meet my need? Do I like the color purple? You're going to figure it out. You're going to judge well. That's a little bit of an explanation of discernment. When we come to Christ, there's a discernment process. We have to figure out, is this what we need? Is this what we want? There's a discernment that's going on in there. What we and the world sometimes call wise, God calls foolish. And we read in here, God has made it foolish. Why would God make something foolish? As you all know, when we come to faith, it can be super easy. It could just hit us. And a lot of times, many of you guys, I've heard you say that you just got it. Sometimes, some of us don't get it quite as well. And again, it doesn't matter who got the A in the math class, that's not the issue. People get it, shall we say, in different ways. That's kind of one of the things that he's talking about. This wisdom of the world, people might say, oh, this person is brilliant. How many brilliant people do you know that are not believers? I bet you could name some. I bet you could name some. So again, it's this wisdom of the world, that brilliant person that pops in our mind that is not a believer. Wisdom over here, it's got to be linked up with the wisdom of the cross, Christ crucified. How is God's wisdom different from the wisdom of the world? Paul identifies the divine Greek goddess figure of Sophia. You may have heard of that. Some people are named Sophia. It's translated to be wisdom. If the Greeks and the Romans and the people of that age had been able to identify Christ with that Sophia wisdom, they probably may not have crucified him because they would have been real impressed. But they did not. Again, they didn't get it. God has turned the wisdom of the world into uselessness or foolishness because that wisdom did not enable the people to know God and to understand the significance of the cross. Now, the cross. As you all have studied, we just finished with Easter, crucifixion was an exceedingly painful, terrible way to die. Tortured. Many of you all have seen Easter pageants, and you've seen movies on TV, and you just see the torture that comes from that, and you see what Christ went through on our behalf. How in the world could that awful, terrible thing become the wisdom of God? Well, we're sitting in this room tonight. Why are we even here? We're here because of that wisdom of God. The wisdom that came because we believe in what happened on that cross. Some really smart people that we know, at this point, maybe they don't get it yet. Prayerfully they will. Maybe some of them will hear some of the testimonies that go around this table some way, somehow, and maybe that wisdom will be imparted to them through the grace of Christ. It tells us that the Jews demanded signs, the Greeks desired wisdom. And it even likens Christ's crucifixion to being a stumbling block or a scandal. That's kind of an odd wording, but we looked that up, and really some of you all may be familiar with hunting. I'm not that much, but what they're talking about is like a snare. As like you might think of I don't know, catching a rabbit or something in the woods, a snare, like a net. So what the Jews, it was like a snare to them. It made them stumble because many of them could not get it initially. What does God's wisdom reveal? When we do have that discernment, and again, we get that through when we realize what happened on the cross. The title, I love the title given to Christ in verse 24, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. That title sets forth Christ's authority to act with and through God on our behalf. So, we, Paul, those bringing the message, we're going to proclaim Christ crucified, the message of the cross, Christ taking our place through his death on that cross and paying the price for our sinfulness. And through that, we are reconciled with God. That is the true identity of Christ. Will you join me in prayer? Dear God, thank you for the good news. There is a lifeboat for us, a lifeboat formed from the wood of the cross. Please allow your wisdom to point to the true identity of Jesus Christ. We remember that old hymn that we sang earlier tonight, Rescue the Perishing. As the words of that hymn say, let us tell them of Jesus, the mighty to save. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.